Hi, and welcome to this week's class. Torah from the Kotel. We are here with the
Ari Lewis Show,
as always, and we will call this "Is Redemption About to Happen?" What do you think? Is redemption about to happen?
It could be.
It could be, but I don't know. I'm not a Navi, but let's give the shear and find out what happens in the shear instead, right?
Sounds good.
All right. Here we go. We have posted on social media the Mishnah Berurah, which is a commentary by the Chafetz Chaim on Orach Chaim, the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch is written as an expansion of the Torah, and the basis of the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber, is the base Yosef commentary in the Torah. We're going to be exploring those inyanim today. The Inyan of the Mishnah Berurah, section 304, it's going to talk about who are we to rest on Shabbos. You have to rest your donkey, your maidservant, your this, and your that, your this, your that. So it usually comes down to two kivunim. Your Eved, or your worker, called in Hebrew as Sachir. And strangely enough, two psukim, there's the 10 Commandments, and then there's the one in Parshas Mishpatim, Vehager. And either your ger and your gate is in the 10 Commandments, or the ger. Who is the ger? Who is the Eved? That is the basis of this year, right? All we know is rest your Eved, rest your ger. Who is the Eved? Who is the ger? Are they the same person? Are they two different people? They are, in fact, two different people. When I finish today, in about an hour from now, we will have learned one thing. How many things?
One thing.
One thing. The ger is not necessarily an Eved. Repeat.
The ger is not necessarily an Eved.
The ger is not necessarily an Eved. In fact, for today's shear's purposes, the ger is not an Eved.
The ger is not, for this year's purposes, the ger is not an Eved.
And let's see if that holds true. Now, there's one kind of nakuda that has to be a given. In the entire sugya that we're on here is how to identify terminology, chazal terminology in the entire Masorah. There's something called goy nachri akum. That, for all intents and purposes, is an idolater. It is somebody not kosher, not holding by mitzvahs. He has not accepted Hakadosh Baruch Hu as God of Israel. Okay? Then there's something called ger. There's something called chasidim, musa olam, ger toshav, ger tzedek. All of our friendly terms for the non-Jew. So there's goy, akum, nachri, and then there's ger toshav, chasidim, musa olam, and all of these terms. They never crisscross. Repeat, they never crisscross. So when we see it is usher to teach Torah to an akum, okay, I agree. It is usher to teach Torah to a nachri. It is usher to teach Torah to a goy. Okay. When it says a ger this or that, a ger toshav this or that, they do not mix. Now, it does get funny, because there are times when we call the Yishmaelim Ger Toshav, based on the Canaanites that we talked about last week with Meir Kahan Shita, that when you conquer a nation, you bring them back to Ger Toshav. That's not us. That's a different type. We are in Hilchos Shabbos. We are not talking about Kibush Haaretz. Therefore, what we are saying is the Meir Kahan Yishmael Canaanite, we're not looking for him to refine out of his status of conquered people. We do say, though, if he wants to convert, he may. But we're not going there. What we're saying is Stam Umasa Oilam, until Mashiach comes. Our job is to be connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the secret of the Shema Yisrael, Hashem Eloheinu. And then in front of the eyes of the Goyim, Hashem Echad, when Hashem is king over the entire universe, which is the pshat, the ikr pshat of Tikkun Olam B'Malchus Shaddai. When the whole world fulfills the Abrahamic mission, so to speak, Melech Mashiach will be, the whole world and universe recognizes HaKadosh Baruch Hu as king of this universe, in the Torah, Sinai, Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael. The nations then have a task and a mission to refine themselves, to leave Klippa Kabbalistically, and to ultimately reject Avodah Zorah. They have to leave all the impure faith behind, reject Avodah Zorah, recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu, take on Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. Where they go from there, that's where we're going to focus today. What are their options? Everyone knows conversion can be an option, but 80% of converts will not convert. They will not make it through Beis Din. 20% at best will make it through. So yeah, okay, 20% had a Havamina and they'll do it. 80%, where do they go? They've already rejected Avodah Zarah. They don't want to become Jewish for whatever reason. They don't want to divorce the spouse living in Timbuktu. So we have the option of Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. yada yada. And that's where the yada yada breaks down. What we want to say is, where do they go if they can't convert? They rejected Avodah Zarah, they refined out of Klippa. What do we do with those people? And the bigger question yet is, where do we find those people in the Masorah? So when you know where to look in the Masorah, you can find Masoradic things that are shaykh to what you want to know. Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, 304, the laws of Shabbos, Amira Lagoy, the Shabbos Goy you might call them, those halachas, my smichas in Shabbos if you remember. And you will learn how to relate to a non-Jew, be careful. You will learn how to relate to a non-Jew in the laws of Shabbos. You are a Jewish man, I assume, correct?
Correct.
So you have a non-Jew coming over. Can he be your Shabbos Goy?
I figured, yeah.
The answer is if he is an Eino Yehudi Gamor, Mamash Nachri, no mitzvahs, no shaykhis, it's still a machlekes where it's the rice of the Rabbanim. Most people will hold Amir Lagoy is mutter for Eino Yehudi Gamor. Call him a Nachri, call him an Eved who's not circumcised, not moil, not Meshubad the mitzvahs. Then there is something called an Eved. An Eved Kanani takes on the mitzvahs of a woman. He's moil v'toivel. He not only can you not use him to make your cup of coffee on Shabbos morning, he is chayiv to keep Shabbos. Right? He is an Eved Kanani. He has taken on the mitzvahs of a female. So now the question is going to be, what if our friend the Noahide is over in our house? Can he make coffee for me, for you, for himself, for your Rav, his friend, the cousin, or the next door neighbor's dog? Can he do that?
Good question.
That's the answer, the question. Because he's no longer Eino Yehudi Gamor. Right? He's not Jewish, but he's not mamish, not a Jew. He has mitzvahs, he's got some shaykhis to Am Yisrael. What do we do with him? So if it's an Eved, there's a sheet in the Shulchan Aruch. If he did not want to be an Eved Kanani, did not want to be Moil V'Toivel, he said, you know what? I'm going to do Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach and Zil. So that guy right there, he cannot make you a cup of coffee. If you are his Rav, he cannot make you a cup of coffee, and he is to break Shabbos for himself one of three ways, Krisis 9a, like Yantiv, Chul Moed, or Chul Lagamre. Right? He's Kamo Ger Toshav. He's not a Ger Toshav, he's Kamo Ger Toshav. He's not an Eved Kanani, his Gior is in the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. He's not Moyel, but not Toivel. He is not a Shabbos Koi, for all intents and purposes. Shalom. So now we're going to read it in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Mishnah Berurah. This is again, Shulchan Aruch 304, section 3, section 24 in the Mishnah Berurah. Eino Yehudi Gamor. Aval im kibel alav hasheva mitzvahs. If this is talking about a total non-Jew, completely, it's a worker in the hotel. But if that worker in the hotel took on sheva mitzvahs, he is a Ger Toshav. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. He is Ger Toshav. And it is usher to make malacha for a yid, even someone that's not his Rav Kanal. And then, as the Masorah always says, in this sugya it always says, by looking the Rambam Perek Yud Daled Mehilchos Asuri Bia, the Ein Mekablin Ger Toshav is Man She'ein Yovel Noyig. So I would say maybe we're chaylik and we're not going to bring a Ger Toshav. That's the Havamina. That's not the answer. And also an Eved She'einu Ratzu the Kabbalah Lav Mitzvahs Ki Im Sheva Kamo Ger Toshav. There's your Eved who took on Sheva Mitzvahs. Gam Kain Ein Mekablin Oiso Bizman She'ein Yovel Noyig. But then, as the Shita always goes, as we're going to see in Shulchan Shlomo, Rav Auerbach, we're going to see in all the days of Rav Moshe and others that we're going to go into now, they bring the Ravid. Why? Because the halacha is like the Ravid. Ravid Sham Choylik Al Zeh Ayin Sham. The Grease when the Rambam brings that Ravid, everybody knows. What you do is when you hear the words Ger Toshav, you are to say, but the Rambam says not till the Zman Yovel Noyig, and then the Shita will always say, but the Ravid says the halacha kaka, we paskin like the Ravid. We paskin like the Ravid. So now, the question is, and the confusion comes, do we assume that the Eved and the Ger are one Zach, one Ger Toshav, or do we make a chiluk between Kamal Ger Toshav and Ger Toshav? Most people, for example, in Parshas Rei, we have a mitzvah deraisa, mitzvah d'chiyuso, to give nevela to a Ger Toshav. It's pretty hard to make that a convert, because a convert does not eat nevela. The Shulchan Aruch says, give the nevela to a Ger Toshav. Why? Because that is lechatchila what we are to do. But if you cannot find a Ger Toshav lecharchila, then you do machira to a nachri. And why do we put the Ger Toshav first? Because there's always, whether yovel, non-yovel, ger in your gates, there is a mitzvah, the mitzvah of chiyuso, to give nevela to the Ger Toshav. You'll say, but I never met a Ger Toshav. Very good, go sell it to a nachri. You have a chiyuv to look for the nachri. So now we know that there is such a thing as a Ger Toshav in halacha, matters of Shabbos, whether you have your wine in your home. The Ger Toshav can be in your house when you have the wine, but you cannot keep your wine by the Ger Toshav because Uncle Frank is an idolater and he will touch it and it becomes usher. Therefore, we want to know, do we have a distinct category called Ger Toshav non-Eved? And in English, you would call him a Noahide. Is there a proper Noahide? The Mishnah Berurah says yes. Is there almost identical to him in all the Makairis? Is there an Eved, non-Eved Kanani, who's Kamo Ger Toshav, and they look identical? They do look identical, but there are nafkaminas where they're no longer identical. And then they'll say, the Rambam will say, but we don't Makayim an Eved like this today. And the Rav will say, we are Makayim an Eved like this today. And if we say that there's a Ger Toshav today, and they say the Rambam, then it's pretty hard to get a Ger Toshav. How do we get the Ger Toshav? Because we say the Rav is the Halchamaisa, so therefore there is a Ger Toshav. Then it goes Chazer back to this. Do we say it's Ger Toshav that he's a Noachide, or Ger Toshav like he's an Eved, who was not Moev Toivel, not an Eved Kanani, but he took on Sheva Mitzvahs Kamo Ger Toshav. So, the Havaminas and the questions generally are from the Eved category. There's not much written on the Noachide category, because there's not much of a nafkamina. Avodah Zorah 64b, the middle opinion, who Ezehu Ger Toshav, someone who took on the 7 laws of Noach. It usually ends there. You give him the nevela, you can maybe have your wine with him in your house, not Uncle Fred's house. The Eved has many more nafkaminas, and that's where the Rambam is mamish chol. Because the Rambam's going to say, Ein yovo noyeg, there's no Eved kamozeh, like this today, which the Ravid says, that Eved we do Makayim. And we'll say, okay, even though the Ravid says that, that's not why we brought the Ravid. We brought the Ravid so that we can have a kosher Noachide today. Now you'll say that's problematic, because if the Ravid is the Psak Halakha L'maisa, then we have an Eved Ger Toshav who's like a Noachide Eved, semi-Eved Kanani, lo Moav, lo Toivel. And there's where you get the questions. Since the halach is like the Ravid, what do we do with this Eved who's not Moav Toivel and he's Kamo Ger Toshav? He's not actually Ger Toshav. So we find the Biur Halacha, and the Biur Halacha quotes the Magin Avraham, and the Magin Avraham wants to say, Im ki bel alav mitzvahs hanagis be'Eved v'hu sachir. So he's an Eved Kanani, he's Moyel, and he's a Sachir. Nearly the Ein Rabu Mitzvah al Shvis HaSoch Shal Yisrael Atzmoi. In parentheses, Perish the Imay Sil Yisrael Achir, but Vadai answer min Torah. That Eved Kanani, or Eved semi Kanani, right? He's a Sachir. He cannot do Melacha for his Rav or another Yid. The lo hizira Torah ela al Eved Kanoi Kinyan Oilam aval Eved Asulasus Melacha Afilu La'atzmoi Da Hakiba Alav Mitzvahs Anogas by Isha Ad Kan Lushoini. To make a long story short, out of this Biur Halacha in the Mishnah Berurah here, he's going to ask, is there a possibility for some kind of half giur? It's a question, it's not an answer. He's asking, is there a half giur that this Eved, non-moil, non-toivel, is not an Eved Kanani Mamash stated on the mitzvahs of Anisha, but he's not a stam of Akum Goy Nakri, he's not a stam Noachai. Why? He wants to take on more mitzvahs and even Shabbos. That's the question. Because in the time of his Gior, the Eved Kanani, who's Moed V'Toivel, does take on Shabbos, and that's why you have to rest him on Shabbos. That's why Rashi in the Seres HaDibros calls him a Ger Tzedek non-Jew. Now, we have a guy who's a little less than that. He was maybe Moed V'Nar Toivel. He is an Eved Sachir, and at the time of his Gior, he's like, I want to keep Shabbos. He took on Shabbos at the time of his Gior. And the Shulchan Shlomo wants to know, was that kosher? Can you do that? And the Shulchan Shlomo is going to say, no, there's no din Ger Toshav today, so he didn't have to make that declaration, that kabbalah. And the other cases, we don't even know what kind of kabbalah it is. What was that kabbalah doing? What is that I want to take on? So the Shulchan Shlomo is saying, not so fast, it's not shaykh to today, but if you have an Eno Yehudi Gamor who takes on Zion mitzvahs, and then he says he wants to not keep Shabbos the derech chiyuv, but it's mutter for him then shari, he's allowed to do it, not b'tzad chiyuv, not mitzvah oisei. He's allowed to rest, and he doesn't make malacha for you. That's the Shulchan Shlomo. Now, the question that was posed to me is, everybody's saying this Mishnah Berurah is problematic, and the answer is it's actually not problematic at all. It's problematic when you take the biur halacha, when you attach it to the Eved Ger Kamo Ger Toshav. When you talk about a Ger Toshav, nobody in the planet ever did or ever will have a problem with a Noahide in your house, and they're going to say, what, he should make a cup of coffee? No one ever said that. It is perfectly mutter to be a goy who refines himself out of klippa, and he raises his right hand, he says, I'm taking on the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. And he does that, and he comes over to your house Shabbos morning, and you say, please don't use my microwave Shabbos morning. And he says, okay, I'll do it in my bedroom, or I'll do it when you're not in the room. But then we say parallel, if there's a Ger Toshav, have nothing to do with the land of Israel, because he's not an Eved. Toshav is a darga. Ger, as in the Ger of your gates, like Parshas Rei with the Nevela. Why do we call him Toshav, says the Rambam in 14.7 of his Surah Bien, not 14.8. 14.8 we say Ein Yovanoyig, but in 14.7, why do we call him Toshav? Because it's mutter for him to live upon us, which the Magid Mishnah will say, I never heard of that. And the Ravid will say, I heard of that. There's the Sugya. But in any case, Toshav, Ezehu Ger Toshav, Avodah Zarah 64b, wants to say Toshav is a darga. He's not just Ger, because Ger could be an idolater as well. Yishmaelim have the din of, like the Canaanites, a Ger Toshav, only literally a stranger living among us. But if we want to say Ezehu Ger Toshav, Nafkamina, Latzad Mitzvah Chiyuso, now Toshav is a darga, Ezehu Ger Toshav. So now that we have this inyan, it comes up the other possibility that has to because of the Ravid Shita. Now we can have Kamo Ger Toshav and an Eved who's not Moev Toivo, and now he took on the 7 laws. They're looking identical. But this Eved, instead of giving Moev Toivo, he says, I want to keep Shabbos and more mitzvahs. And the Mishnah Berurah says, let's entertain that. And he says, at the time of his Gior, he said, I'm keeping all this stuff. And everyone says, hey, slow down. Why? They said, nobody paskins according to that Mishnah Berurah. And you know what I say? You're right. They don't. You're right. The commentaries brought were the Shevet HaLevi, Rav Moshe Feinstein, and Rav Chaim Kanievsky. And we are going to show that there's a consistent daya and psak halacha. Nobody said that today an Eved will say, I keep more mitzvahs and I have a half gior and I'm keeping Shabbos. Nobody ever said that. What we did say was there's a Noachide who's not an Eved. And if the nafkamina is on that Noachide, what can he keep more than that? That's none of my business. What we do know is that Noachide, by the Shita, by the allowance of the Ravid, there for there to be a lush and Ger Toshav today in this strange sugi where the Rambam says no, Ravid says yes, then there's an Eved, but we don't hold of an Eved, then what do you hold by? A Noachide. And he's not allowed to make you a cup of coffee on Shabbos morning, and he does malacha for himself, like the 3 Shitas in Krisis 9a. Yontif, Chol Moed, and Chol. And he says, that's how I keep Shabbos, everybody. I break malacha, I don't do malacha for a yid, I keep it along those terms. Shulchan Shlomo says, Shari, it is mutter for him to acknowledge the Shabbos of Israel, not as Israel, saying that's their day. It's the day I don't make my friend Ari a cup of coffee. I don't refrain from doing malacha. I'm not doing it from the Brit covenant perspective. I'm doing it because my Jewish, distant, whatever you want to call them, they don't do malacha today, and in my connection as a Nilva Ger, Isaiah 56:3, is to not make malacha for you, for your Rav, or your friend, and I am going to take it easier and rest on that day. Din Sinai, Din Yisrael, but it has no shaykhis to Shamor Shabbos like a Yid, or the covenant as a Yid. They are different planets. Different planets, different kavanot. Back to the Biur Halacha. Is there such a thing as this Eved? Because when they ask off the Mishnah Berurah, they're not asking off our Noachide friend. They're asking on the Eved. You got that? On the Eved. No one talked about the Noachide there. That's someone who accepted the 7 laws of Noah. Now, you'll say, can he keep Shabbos like this Eved who said, oh, all of a sudden I'm chayiv in Shabbos? No, because there's no din Ger Toshav today. He cannot say, I now have an 8th mitzvah, so to speak, and I do kacha, kacha, kacha. But the Rambam says in Milchos Malachim 10:10, he can do any of the mitzvahs he wants, Lefi Hilchaso. But it does not mean that all of a sudden he has more mitzvahs. He has a reshus, not a chiyuv. He is not doing an aveira by not fulfilling those mitzvahs. If he wants to give tzedakah, he figures out, he learns in the Torah how to give tzedakah, and he gives tzedakah kihilchaso. It is now non-idolatrous money. Then the only question is, what is his schar if he's not exactly mitzvah v'oisei, or if he can get on the darga of mitzvah v'oisei, and that's a different inyan, which we're not talking about. So now that we did the Mishnah Berurah, let's go ahead now and talk about our friends in the days. It's brought to my attention that Rav Moshe Feinstein would have a problem with understanding the Mishnah Berurah as such. Well, not true. When we find Rav Moshe, he says, Goy Gamor Shahu Sachir, right? A total non-Jew who's like the hotel worker, and the question is, can he make me coffee on Shabbos morning? Right? He's a Goy Gamor Shahu Sachir, he's a worker. Ein Rabba Mitzvoya Al Shvisaso. Look at that. He quotes the Magen Avraham. And he says, Im Kibel Lav Mitzvahs Kanogas Eved V'hu Sachir Near Li. Dein Rabba Mitzvah, Aval Eved Asr Lasu Malacha Fil La'atzmo the Haki Ba'alav Mitzvah V'nogas Ba'isha Oba Bior Halacha. Hey, there's our Bior Halacha. How about that? Ritzorach Iyam Gadol Kivan She'ein Kanoilo. Surely Bavadai Ein Gerus L'Chatzayin. He can't just say I'm half convert today. My Mahani Kabbalah the Mitzvahs Eved. What is he doing by saying all of a sudden I'm an Eved? Right, I'm a total non-Jew, because I'm working in your hotel, I'm a sachir, and he gets a have of me to say, since I don't need to be a moil v'toivel, all of a sudden I'm an Eved, and I want to keep Shabbos. Can he do that? Shitas Magin Avram, you would say, Akum Kabil Alav Mitzvahs Ke'Eved Vadai Tamuah. That's mamish weird. Why would you think now all of a sudden an Akum is an Eved? Like the kasha and the biur halacha. That was his kasha. How can this worker become an Eved Chetzayin, and all of a sudden he's chayav in Shabbos? How can this Ben Noach, why do we call him a Ben Noach? Because he does Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach, even as an Eved, Kamo Ger Toshav. Lo mashma zeh b'Rambam Perag Yud Hilchos Tes, Shekasav Ein Manichin Osu L'Chadash Dal Lasos Mitzvahs La'atzman Madasan Ela O Yeger instead of Yikiba Al Kol Mitzvahs O Yamur B'Torah So V'Lo Yaisi V'Lo Yigra Tzarech Im. Rambam Hilchos Malachim 10:9 never said that was an Eved, by the way. Why don't we know that's an Eved in Hilchos Malachim 10:9 in the Rambam? Lashon Shvisaso. That's the Eved, 304 in Shulchan Aruch. And it never said, by the way, you might get a Havamina to become an Eved Kanani. It never said that. So those that are wondering how Rav Moshe Feinstein's psak on Hilchos Malachim 10:10 could also be an Akum when it clearly says Ben Noach takes on the rest of the mitzvahs. Because if you want to say 10:9 is this Eved Shita, and then accidentally I did a couple of mitzvahs, does he get schar for that? Rav Moshe will say, look over there, there's a small schar, it's not a regular schar. That's only if you want to say that 10:9 is an Eved. But if it's a Stam Goy, and he's becoming a Noachide, then 10:10 becomes a Shita of a Noachide Ben Noach, who's on the level as a Rogod Shover Gon Paskins, without the base din of a Ger Toshav today, then it's a Ben Noach, because there's no Ger Toshav base din. Therefore, he can do the mitzvahs, Hilchaso mitzvah, I say he receives schar, and the sugya goes from there. There is your Rav Moshe Psak. Now we will go further, weiter in Shas and Poiskim. We have the Shevet Halevi, and the Shevet Halevi will address also the Magid Avraham and our famous Bior Halacha. Does he bring up the issue of the Noachide? No. He brings up the issue, what was the Mishnah Berurah thinking? How do you get a Sachir who's moil becomes suddenly Pitom, he's an Eved? And he's not moil, and he's not Toivel, and he says, I want to do Shabbos, Pitom, all of a sudden. He says, you don't have it. He says, how in the world, if he's not moil, how would he come to any of this? And if he is moil, what made you think that he can just all of a sudden do that? So then we skip down into the bottom of this, and he brings the Inyan. Brings the Inyan. Second. And his answer is, if we go by the Ravid and we have an Eved, he cannot do Malacha for his master. When you rent your Eved out to Shloimowitz, can Shloimowitz now, does he have to rest your Eved? Because it's not his karka. It's not his Inyan, it's not his kinyan. So therefore we will learn that mihu lefi ze rabu rishon the yeshlo bo kinyan haguf yiye musar alav v'gam hu toile bebeis adeyus la'el im kol yisrael mitzvoyin al shvisas evdei achirim. That's the question in the Bior Halacha. You have an Eved Moyel Sachir. Can he take on mitzvahs and Shabbos, it was never asking that it was a non-moil v'toivel. It was a sachir, not to say not moil v'toivel. He was a sachir because he was an Eved Kanani that you rented out for somebody else. Now it becomes a question if you have to rest him as well. Right? So again, aval pitron divrei magin Avraham, ve'im kibel alav mitzvahs anagos be'Eved, v'hu sachir shehu mitzvah al shevis, afal pi yesh she'ein rabu mitzvoya alav kivan shehu rak sachir. Hine masha garam lehagon mishnah brura b'bior alach lekul anal hu Eved moyel sachir. Eich mishkachas la. Ve'im hu aro heich mitzvah al mitzvahs ke'Eved, aval ledidi v'dvarim pshutim le'echad kana Eved zeh. Nachnis also la avdus la mitzvahs shel Eved bekol praktav dahainu mila utfila ukabalas mitzvot. There it is. Kishahu bereshus rabu zeh b'vaday Eved hu v'lo sachir ela the rabu zeh haskiru liyisrael sheni liyoschiru lakito v'al zeh ka'amar magin Avram dahani the rabu zeh ratzum leimer hasheni eino mitzvah olav shvis haso mehatayra da'ino kinyan oilam shalom makom makom kivan da Eved kibel al atzmo me'ikru v'nase Eved gamor ke'Eved mitzvah ol atzmoi prima ganam ksav bekitzur v'hu adin Eved moyel sachir im nikar she'ein oisid ladas rabo ein rabo muzar alav. I'll read them afarish Eved moyel v'husachir v'hainu be'Eved ragil afal pikein husachir alkein kanal mi lefi zeh rabo arishon the yeshlo bo kinyan aguf iye muzar alav agam hu toile bebeza deyes la'el im kol Yisrael mitzvoyin al shvis haso Eved la'achirim. So there we see the Shevet Levi is talking about the Biur Agula, about the Tzad Eved, and not the Noahide. There we have Rav Moshe was talking in Eved. We have the Shevet Halevi was talking in Eved. We have the Mishnah Berurah was talking in Eved and talking in Noahide. But everyone addressed the Eved issue because it's a question: can he all of a sudden become Chayav in Shabbos? Where the Shulchan Shlomo says by the Noahide he never thought to become Chayav in Shabbos. He thought it's a derech heter only because since he's not making you a cup of coffee, he thought to take a nap on Shabbos afternoon. Is he allowed to take a nap on Shabbos afternoon while he's not making you a cup of coffee? Then we had one more day in the Psak Halacha. Rav Chaim Kanievsky Paskins exactly on Dalet Shin in the Shulchan Aruch Eza Eved Mitzvah Al Shvis Haso. That is always going to be the code word. Eved Mitzvah Al Shvis Haso. Goyish, pay attention. Goyish Shabbos Chayev Misa. Okay, good. Rambam Hilchos Malachim 10:9. Yesher Koich. V'chein Ger Toshav Daino Kiba Alav Zayin Mitzvahs B'nei Noach V'Shalula Alva V'Dezora Afilu B'Shituf. So there is such a thing as a non-goy, non-akum, non-nachri. He's refined. He took on the Sheva mitzvahs, and unlike a regular Noahide who has no mitzvah bechlal to believe in a Kodesh Baruch Hu, only not to blaspheme him to avodah zarah. But if he should break away from shituf, he says, "I only believe in a Kodesh Baruch Hu, the Creator, Borei Olam." So he is not in the shituf. Makom makom yesh chiluk bein goy lager toishev the goy mutter min atoyer litzvoso. Lasos afilo avar Yisrael v'rak min the Rabban in Osir aval Ger Toshav Asr min Torah l'shum Yisrael litzvoso lasos malacha avoro v'rak malachas atzmo mutter lo la'asos. So a goy Shabbos chayav misa v'chein Ger Toshav dahainu kabbalah of the Zayin mitzvahs b'nei noach v'shlo avodah zarah afilo b'shituf. He is not chayav in Shabbos. If he says I have served God without shituf and I have 7 mitzvahs and I am chayav in Shabbos like you the Jew, chayav misa, not literally. But Shemayim he's chayiv. But so is there a difference between the goy akum nachri and this Ger Toshav by the shita of the Ravid through the Mishnah Berurah all the way to Rav Kanievsky? There is the goy mamish has we say goy being goy the Ger Toshav, the goy mutter from the Torah to command him even for the sake of a Jew is only midrabanan aser. The goy mutter, it's allowed from the Torah that he makes you coffee, but the Rabbanan we say don't do it. The Ger Toshav Asr min ha-Torah l'shum Yisrael etzvosu la'asos malacha ivoro barak malachas asmo mutter lo la'asos. He can only do malacha for himself. And what did we say about the Shulchan Shlomo and all these guys? Didn't we say when we mentioned Ger Toshav, we mentioned the Rambam and then the Ravid? Didn't we say that?
Yeah, I
think we said that. The Dasar Rambam. She'ein mekablim Ger Toshav. And didn't we say there's always a parallel between the Noahide and the Eved? Eved she'ein right to the kabbalah ki im Zayin mitzvahs kamo Ger Toshav ela b'zman she'yovel noyig and the Ravid choylik al zeh So we have the psak halacha like the Ravid. Ravid says there is an Eved today, therefore there is a Noahide today. And you'll say, then how do we govern the Eved today? Well, the Eved becomes a question. As we saw, it's a big question. And he requires kabbalah. And we don't know how to do the kabbalah. So we say, probably stay away from avadim, but we'll deal with a sachir. But no one was making a miyut on the Noahide. He doesn't need kabbalah, which we're going to get into in the Grease and the Rambam. And by the way, there's a yesh oimrim. She'im kiba lav zayin mitzvahs shmir shabbos mahani kablasoi sarich lishmor shabbos v'chein in kabel lav mitzvahs achemrim makom makom dino k'ger toshav shar devarim ad shekiba lav kula mitzvahs. It's only a yesh oimrim. So we have the shita, the havamina of the biur halacha, that if there was an Eved who wanted to take on Shabbos as a chiyuv, there's a Mishnah Berurah found a way to do it. He says it's a yesh omrim. No one paskins that way. No one paskins that way, and no one even learns it that way outside of Rav Kanievsky, Dam B'Chaskusa, the Mishnah Berurah. Otherwise, it's Shevet Lefi and the Rav Moshe Feinstein commentary suggest exactly what the kavanah was of the Magi and Avraham, based on a Eved Kamo Ger Toshav and his desire to take on more mitzvahs and such. Now, the only question that remains is going to be, how do we do Kabbalah for this Noahide? How do we do Kabbalah for him? And this is one of the most classic of all classics, the Grease and the Rambam. The Inyan Ger Toshav, the lo dami kablaso legerish shel ger tzedek. When the Eved, Kanani, or this Eved who want to do it halfway, they want to make a gior that is mamish a gior. It's a conversion. You're not going back from that. That's why there's mila involved. So therefore, we know how to do that. You have a couple of edim. You get to bris milah. You go into the mikvah. You take on the mitzvahs. There's a whole world of conversion. Have fun. All you 20% who will convert successfully, but the 80% who won't. He says the gior of the Ger Toshav, non-eved, is different than the convert. The convert, it's a question of how do we do the kabbalah? What does he have to do? How does he do it? We have 3 chaverim, we have a based in Yisrael, we do it with Zman Yovonoyig, Ein Zman Yovonoyig. How do we do it, Bechol? I would love to make Ger Toshav, but how do we do a Kabbalah? That's the Havamina. Because we have to figure out how to make Kabbalah by a convert. He says the Kabbalah by Ger Toshav is not a how do we do it, it's a what is it. And that's Hilchos Malachim, Rambam, chapter 8, halachas 10 and 11. You got to know that Moshe Rabbeinu gave the Torah from Sinai. You have to know why you're doing it, what the 7 laws are. Basically, you have to be a proper Ger Toshav as to what a proper Ger Toshav is. And you raise your right hand, you put your right hand in, you put your right hand out, you put your right hand in, and you shake it all about. And you say, I'm a Ger Toshav, and he just did it. And then he says like this: when you become a Ger Toshav with that kind of gior, only by knowing what you're doing, you're standing in a place of Ger Toshav, and you're not a stam ben noyach. Why not? Because the din Ger Toshav is only his attachment to Israel. It's an attachment to Israel, a shaykhis to Israel. If I'm a Ger Toshav, I'm a Noahide, I take on no other mitzvahs. Why do I want to be called din Ger Toshav? Because I want to know at Ari's house, I don't make him coffee on Shabbos morning. And if you call me a goy, akum, or nachri, then I technically could make you a cup of coffee din deraisa. But if I say, I'm a Noachide, I put my right hand in, shook it all about, you cannot say, make me a cup of coffee, and I say, you can't make you a cup of coffee. You say, why? I say, I am a Ger Toshav. You say, but you're an Eved? I say, no, did you not learn about the Perushim? This has nothing to do with me being a Sachir and elevating into now Chai of Shabbos like an Eved. What do you call Ezehu Ger Toshav? Mishu Shekabel Zayim Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. And therefore, I have a din deraisa not to make you a cup of coffee. And you'll say, but are you going to do malacha? I say, you better believe it. I'm going to go in my room. I'm going to make a nacho supreme in the microwave on Shabbos morning. I'm going to break malacha one of 3 ways: Yantif, Chol Moed, and Chol. And then you say, but why are you resting all day? It's mutter. It's not usher for me to rest today. I'm a Nilva Ger. I'm a Ger Toshav Lefi Din Sinai Lefi Din Yisrael. My Shiva mitzvahs. How do I really exemplify not giving avodah zarah? Because I don't make you coffee on Shabbos morning. In fact, all day long, I don't make Jews coffee on Shabbos morning. Therefore, I am not denied avodah zarah now. That's not why you keep Shabbos. You keep Shabbos because you have a brit from Akash Baruch Hu, not to make Shabbos, make me coffee today. So he says that there are several dinim different for a ben noyach and for a ger toshav. Like if there's an accidental murder, one is killed, one gets gullus. Hari da kabbalah shenase al yada la ger toshav chadasha dinim gam la'inyan ger toshav ba'atzmo. The Torah chalaka ben ger toshav la ben noyach. All the time that this ger toshav ben noyach non-eved, he is in that status of kabbalah. He is not a ben noyach stam. However, kain de'im yakzor mekablaso bavada yedino ka ben noyach da'alma. Tomorrow I said, you know what? I'm not interested in this din ben noyach. I'm bringing Uncle Fred over. How do you like that? You say, then don't touch my wine. The begufa lonis chadish tvar. Nothing changed in its being in a status of kabbalah, non-evid, noyachai. Rak hakul b'shvil kablasai. As long as he's in kablasai, he's in a din kablasai. Aval kol zman shehu oimim b'kablasai. Hari ha'toyra nitne lo dinim b'chalaka beino ben noyach stama. Lefi zeh gam hach dina de Ger Toshav Noahide elabas mashiva noyagu gam kila in kula dinim shagir Toshav. That whole din yovel, that's one din of his realm of dinim. You want to say there's no Ger Toshav because there's no Jubilee. No, there is a Ger Toshav, and one of his dinim is the Ger Toshav of the Yovel. It's one of his dinim. So you know what? I don't have a full schus as Ger Toshav, but I'm still a Ger Toshav Lefi. I don't make you a cup of coffee on Shabbos morning. And therefore we're going to say, Ein Mekablin, Mamela Dehu Adin Kabenoy Ba'alma Va'ayin Magin Ba'at. The Das Rambam, Ikar Adin Hu the Bashash Ein Yovel Noyeg, Ein Mekablin. But the Rambam, if you want to take the Das of the Rambam all the way through, he'll say, no, you are not a Ger Toshav, there's no Ger Toshav. You're a regular ben noyach. None of this gear stuff works. Remember what we said? Always quote the Rambam before we get to the Ravid. It's a formula. We've seen it every time, correct? The ayim b'magin mishnah. Behilchas Yisuri Biyah Sheksav Gamki Pashu came with Rambam. You'll even say the Magin Mishnah agrees with you. But by the way, in Hilchas Shabbos 2014, the Magin Mishnah says there is such a thing, however, as Ger Toshav in matters of Shabbos. Maybe not for Kashur to Eretz Yisrael. Like the Ravid wants to say both at the same time. Magin Mishnah will say in Shabbos Ger Toshav, what? You didn't read the Vodavor 64b that a Mitzvah Chayuso do not make Ari a cup of coffee on Shabbos, but attach to the land of Israel. No. That we don't have Ajsim Zman Yovel Noyed. But even if you want to say like the Magin Mishnah, however, Das Harayved Acheres Bazeh, the Rakle Inyan Dinim Yuchtim Huda Talib is Masha Yovel Noyeg, only special dinim, like a type of Deraisa Mitzvah Chiyuso, do we have to do all these things by Yovel? Otherwise, to not make a Jew a cup of coffee on Shabbos, just like the Mishnah Berurah says, Ger Toshav has nothing to do with the land of Israel, nothing to do with Canaanites, nothing to do with slaves or servants or workers. What do you call a non-Jew who took on the 7 laws of Noach, Avodah Zorah 64b? Ger Toshav. Toshav means a dorga. He's like a settled type of ger. What kind of ger? Ger Asher B'Sharecha, the one you give the nevela to, Mitzvah Chayuso. However, Aval Shitas Harambam, Kimat Pshuta Mefareshet Kanal. He says, I understand that the Rambam seems very clear here. It seems like there's no deal until there's Yovel. I know that. Then he goes on to say, how in the world do we actually do the Kabbalah? And he brings Hilchos Malachim of the Rambam 8, 10, and 11. And he ends by saying, Eza din nemar bezeh sof sof divrei harambam tumulhi me'od. They are very strange. Ve'ein lahem shum muvan l'chira. The reason why Ger Toshav is so difficult is because the Rambam cannot be taken at surface value. It is lumdis, it is iyun, and you have to look at the bigger picture. People think that there's no Ravid, there's no Magin Mishnah. They just take a Pashut Rambam and say, we did away with our friend the Ger Toshav. And then they did away with all these things. Or we say, it's usher to do kacha, kacha, kacha because of an akum. Not realizing that the Goy Shavelt can always do away with akum Goy Nachri Eino Yehudi Gamor by doing what the Mishnah Berurah says when they come to your house. They take on the Sheva Mitzvahs as a Ger Toshav. Now, an Eved at the same time can come out of that and say, so since there's a sheet of the Ravid, I can now be an Eved and I can take on Kamo Ger Toshav also. I'm a Sachir. We say, okay, I'll pee the Ravid, you have to be able to say that, but don't think that there's a Din Ger Toshav that you have to, and then that you're Chayev in Shabbos, because you're not. And that's what all the Perushim are saying. You're not Chayev in Shabbos. But the Noahide is able to rest while he's not making you a cup of coffee. Yesher Koyach.